In this video, I want to talk to you about a really useful model for helping to understand the stakeholders of an organisation. It's about understanding the customer groups and the wider stakeholders that organisations need to interact with. And the model is the 6 markets model, and it's from Christopher, Payne and Ballantyne from 2002. So it's a fairly old model, been around a long time, but it's one of those models that is really enduring, great content, and absolutely as applicable now as it was when the authors wrote about it back in 2002. Now it's from this book, Relationship Marketing, from those authors. Good book, as I say. Yes, it's out of date. There's 2 or 3 other models in it that are also really helpful. So do have a look at that. Definitely a recommended text for any marketer is that. But what is it? What are the 6 markets? Now, as I say, they are a way of understanding the stakeholders of an organisation, the stakeholders the organisation needs to build relationships with. So those 6 markets are all centred on, or include at the centre, the customer markets. Now, obviously from a marketer's perspective, customer markets are the key one, the one that we think of most obviously from a marketing perspective. But what Christopher et al. Identified is that to provide the right service, quality, relationships to the customer markets, we also have to have the right relationships with the other 5 of the 6 markets. So that's the internal markets, the referral markets, influence markets, recruitment markets, and the supplier and alliance markets. So what I want to do in this video is talk you through what is meant by each of these 6 markets. So it's a model that can be used in terms of auditing the environment or the micro environment of the organisation, understanding the stakeholders, and that then provides us the understanding of how to build relationships through strategic, tactical and implementation areas, how to build relationships with each of these 6 markets. If we understand them well, then it helps us to build those relationships. So let's start off with the obvious important one from a marketing perspective, that of the customer markets. So what are we looking at? What are we looking at here when we talk about the customer markets? Well, obviously, yes, we are talking about customers, those organisations that buy products or services from us as an organisation, or those people that could purchase. So the customers, the target customers, those segments that we are aiming for, the individuals, organisations that are ideal for the organisation as customers because they already use the kind of products or services we offer, or they could be doing. So within our customer markets, obviously we need to understand the actual customers. But we also need to think about, or many organisations need to think about, the intermediaries. What about those intermediary markets that we utilise? So whether that's agents, distributors, wholesalers, retailers, whatever name, whatever terminology is on there, those intermediaries, the channel in terms of marketing mix elements that provide our product or service to the customers if we are dealing through intermediaries. And the other third area that is identified by Christopher et al. As part of the customer markets is the consumers. So sometimes, obviously, consumers, the word there is often used in relation to individuals using it for themselves, but it's the people that consume or use the product or service. So they may not be the people that actually are the customers that place the order and actually buy from us. But these three areas within the customer markets, customers, intermediaries and consumers, obviously from a marketing perspective, you've probably already looked at those in other elements of studies, learning, auditing and so on. But the core, if you like, of the 6 markets model is this customer markets. But they don't operate in isolation, of course. That customer market, it's part of the 6 markets. So let's move on and have a look now at the referral markets. Now, the referral markets are those elements, those stakeholders, those external elements that will refer business, for want of a better word, and it might not always be the right word if you're in a not-for-profit, but will refer customers, that will reference people to the organisation as customers. They will make those referrals. Now, we can have advocacy referrals, those people that are advocates. Now, there's another model from the same book, Relationship Marketing, in terms of the relationship marketing ladder. We've got a separate video available for that model as well, in terms of what they look at. So advocates, those people that will advocate the organisation and recommend to people that they utilise the products or services that are available from it. So advocacy referrals. And also customer-based development. Now, these obviously are really important markets for us, because what we're talking about here is referrals from current customers. So these are people that currently purchase from us who will then refer the organisation to friends, colleagues, etc. People, they advocate that business, so they're customer referrals. Now that's one side of it. But we can also look at the referral market from the side of incentive-based referrals or reciprocal referrals. So incentive-based, we encourage somebody to make that referral, or a reciprocal referral, maybe with other organisations. Well, we'll send our business to you if you send your business to us. And so we get that reciprocity happening between it, where organisations help each other out on that principle. So those are what we would refer to as third-party referrals. So we've got, in terms of the referral markets, feeding into the customer markets, we've either got customer referrals or third-party referrals. So obviously really important areas to be considering there, and understanding who these people might be. So who might give us reciprocal referrals? What could we do in terms of incentive-based referrals? How do we actually encourage existing customers to give referrals, and how much do they do it at the moment? So that's the referral market, which, say, that's one. Referral business is really, really important. What's then an influence market? So referrers, they influence, and actually we've ended up with this terminology of influencers, and many of which actually might be incentive-based referrers or reciprocity. But there are specific, or identified by Christopher et al., specific influence markets that influence the market of the organisation. So who are we looking at in terms of that? Well, it could be government. The government might influence the way the organisation operates, what it does, how it works on that basis. Particular user groups, the influence of those user groups. So they might be slightly separate from consumers. If we take an example of health professionals, for example, in a health service, a manufacturer of health-related products, the customer would be the buyers and so on in the health service. The consumers would be the patients, but we might have the users, the nurses, the doctors, or whoever, who actually do it, and they will influence the choices on that basis. It could be credit rating agencies, and a totally different perspective here for influence. But that if you are a large organisation in particular, what's the credit rating of the organisation? That will influence the business, actually, in terms of both suppliers, which we'll come on to shortly, of the organisation, but also customers who will look and see, well, if I buy off them, are they financially strong and around for the long term? So credit rating agencies can be quite important. The business press and media will influence what's being said about the organisation. What are they talking about? Positive, negative, whatever stories in terms of the organisation. Obviously, really important side of it there. Environmentalists, for many organisations, this has become a really significant element. Environmental pressure groups, for example, on that basis. So understanding the impact and influence of environmental pressure groups could be really significant for the organisation. And the other element, now this isn't comprehensive, you could add others in terms of this, that are relevant, specific to your context, but the financial influence ones, so shareholders and other institutions, banks in particular, are likely to be a strong influence. An organisation ends up doing what its shareholders need it to do. It responds to what the banks request, if it owes banks money, of course, on that basis. So understanding these and any other equivalents that are appropriate. So maybe regulators might be an influence market for some organisations. If there's a regulatory body or even an industry body, could be an additional influence markets. As I say, not comprehensive on this one, but some thoughts in relation to the influence markets. So obviously that's a really important area as well. All of these are important. But there's another one here, the recruitment market. So what are we talking about here? Well, any organisation relies upon and needs staff to help it to operate. Now, this one I always feel is a little bit more relevant to larger organisations who have specific, regular recruitment requirements. But every organisation might need to recruit somebody at some point, and having the right reputation as an employer is important. Being seen in the right places as an employer is important to recruit the right staff at the right time and in the future or now. Now, our own staff are really important in terms of this. We will look into shortly at the internal market, but our own staff are a real key element of the recruitment market because they talk to other people. So it's staff at all levels for it, not just in the HR department, but obviously that's going to be a key one. But they are our own staff are the people that will be in contact maybe with executive search organisations. Those organisations that will go out and look specifically for the right employees for the organisation. But also recruitment agencies. Actually going through a recruitment agency and building relationships with recruitment agencies so that they really understand what the organisation needs in terms of its recruitment. Organisations can advertise and use, as many do of course now, social media, either through consumer media or LinkedIn advertising or social posting for that. But building those relationships again with the advertisers through social media in terms of recruitment. And something that many organisations use in terms of recruitment is universities. The careers fairs and so on, the milk rounds that universities have where recruiters go to the university and talk to prospective students and build relationships, not just at specific events, but on an ongoing basis with those universities. So these are methods, and again, there might be others that are appropriate for your organisation, that organisations can use to build those recruitment relationships with recruitment markets. So that's recruitment markets. What about one that is often not seen to be part of marketing, but can be massively important, and that of the supplier markets or alliances that the organisation has? Now really, that says it all in terms of this. The suppliers, any organisation relies upon suppliers of goods and services to do what it does. It could be raw materials if it's a manufacturer, but it could just be those everyday consumables that the organisation has to have, that if it doesn't have them, it's going to suffer, it's going to miss out. So those building relationships with suppliers, it's part of Porter's 5 forces model, the bargaining power of suppliers. The better our relationships with suppliers, the more likely they are to give preference if that becomes important. So supplier markets count. Alliance markets, partners that the organisation has. Partners in terms of, it could be competitor partners, but anywhere that the organisation has an alliance with others is important. Building those relationships again to and understanding those relationships as part of our stakeholder analysis. So suppliers and alliance markets, another an area that matters. But that leaves us with the final one, the 6th one of the markets, the internal markets for it. So this is inside the organisation. And yes, it's easy to think, that's an HR role, but internal communication, internal marketing very much should be a marketing role. We need to have the right relationships internally to be able to look after our customers externally, the ones that marketing has more of a focus on, of course. So in terms of those internal markets, very, very important, the frontline staff. They're the ones that have that direct communication with the customers. So whether we're talking about salespeople, customer service people, service engineers, whatever we've got, whatever terminology we use, the frontline staff that are there, receptionists can be another, in day-to-day contact with customers. We need good relationships, but we need to understand what the relationship is. Supervisors, those people that supervise the frontline staff, the intermediate managers, if you like, but the managers themselves, what's the relationships here? But recognizing that these all build the relationships with our end user customers. Finally, the chief exec, this has to come right from the top. We need the chief exec buy-in into this. So how are they involved in the delivery of and the building of relationships with all of the other markets? So internally, marketing, building the relationship, internal markets, working towards, that marketing orientation ultimately of all parts of the organisation working towards customer satisfaction. So the internal markets as the final one of the 6 markets from Christopher et al.'s 6 markets model. So that's given you hopefully a good insight into these areas that we need to be understanding, both from an analysis and audit perspective, understanding the situation in relation to these stakeholders, but also then the building of relationships with them when we've got that understanding. So a really useful model in multiple areas of the marketing planning and marketing strategy process. As I say, 6 markets model, Christopher, Ballantyne and Payne from 2002. So hope that's been useful for you. Hope that helps you to understand and utilise in any stakeholder analysis and relationship marketing building activities that you might be looking at.